Every election is a choice, and the choice this election is more important than any we've ever faced. America can choose to move forward or go backward to a time not long ago that almost broke us apart. Have so many already forgotten what the Trump years were? Chaos, corruption, ugliness, cruelty, violence, a wrecked economy, and over 500,000 dead Americans. That's the past that Trump's presidency brought, and it would be our future, too.
2024 is the final battle.
He's worse than ever, unstable and angry, petty and cruel, promising dictatorship and retribution.
I am your warrior. I am your justice.
Assuring his legions of unhinged fanatics that he is their instrument of vengeance. He's not even hiding it, and not one American can hide from it. This election is a choice between what has been and what could be.
I want to do a segment that is all focused on political ads. You know, I love watching ads on this show. I like seeing how different groups are trying to reach people through that form of content. And the one you just watched, obviously pretty powerful, from the Lincoln Project, and we'll get to a couple other ones throughout the segment. But to respond to that one, I do think it's super important to remind people of the reality of Trump's presidency. In his current campaign, he's desperately working to induce collective amnesia in the country, convincing people to go ahead and just forget about one particular year of his presidency. Every metric he'll cite, stories he tells, these are attempts to make people truly believe Biden was president throughout the whole pandemic. There was no 2020. It went 2019, 2021. And this is so important to push back against, because it's not because Trump caused the pandemic and everything that came with that crisis was his fault, but because the job of a president is to handle crises that occur while they are a president. And Biden had to do the same thing. Different, obviously. The beginning versus the middle, how you handle that is different. But when you compare and contrast the records of Biden and Trump, how they handled their respective crises, you learn a lot about their leadership. And this is also really important because tons of people grade Biden as if, it drives me crazy, as if he took over this fantastic situation. But they grade Trump like 2020 didn't exist. He never mishandled the crisis of our time. So they can take into consideration everything that comes of the pandemic then when they're grading Trump. But then with all of Biden related stuff, no. They ignore the pandemic happened. Any issues that came with that was because of him. And so then there's this weird thing where people will blame, for example, inflation that occurred previously in Biden's presidency. It's down now, but previously they'll blame it on Biden when so much of that was an aftermath of pandemic related conditions and responses pre-2021, pre him getting into office. And maybe some of these things wouldn't have been so bad if Trump didn't mishandle the beginning so severely. And then it's crazy that our current economy, given those facts, is so strong. By some metrics, outperforming where we thought it was going to be at this time, as I've broken down the past, even before we knew there was going to be a pandemic. Job growth, for example. But there was a pandemic. But the stewardship of the economy by Biden Democrats in Congress was so effective that we're back on really strong footing after the disaster that Biden had to inherit. Wage growth adjusted for inflation right now is outpacing Trump's economy, even excluding the pandemic. So before the pandemic, wage growth was not as strong under Trump as it currently is under Biden, taking inflation into consideration. Incredible. And then it's super important to remember that Trump's presidency ended in him trying, I'll say it again, to block the peaceful transfer of power. The fake elector scheme, pressuring local officials to engage in fraud, trying to disenfranchise millions of voters, then his followers storming the Capitol. That's the disaster of a situation that he handed to Joe Biden. But again, collective amnesia. A lot of people just omit 2020 from the memory about Trump. It is really aggravating. And quickly, to give you an example of this, then I'll show you these other ads. This is a part of an interview I did for Mochas with MAGA that didn't end up making it in the episode. But it's the Trump supporter genuinely thinking that all the lockdowns, those happened under Biden, not Trump. Even though 2021 is when Biden became president. And that was when things were starting to open back up.
Yeah, I would blame a lot of that on Biden as well, just for shutting down the country. I don't think that COVID was...
The country got shut down under Trump, right? Everything started opening when Biden came into office.
That's, man, see, it's so interesting to hear his perspective.
No, year. You know the years, though. When did COVID start?
2019.
Like, yeah, 2020, everything started ramping up a lot. And so then Trump was president then. Do you remember when
like
things
the
started?
last six months of his presidency.
Well, 2021 is when Biden became president, January 2021. If you look at
that's right.
shutdowns and stuff started getting lifted, that was it, because the vaccines started rolling out.
I disagree with that.
That's not really a disagreeable thing. That's just kind of a timeline.
He
It's crazy. Now, there's definitely an argument that Democratic politicians in states in 2020 were more willing to keep things shut down for longer, trying to handle the pandemic. But people have this skewed memory, believing that Biden as president, quote unquote, shut things down, and what Trump opened them up when he was president, but then Biden's now president. The timeline's all wonky. And Biden's American Rescue Plan did a lot to speed up the recovery and get things back to normal. But again, people just let their memory get all slapped around in service of Trump. Moving on from that, I have now for you some devastating ads about Republican Senator Ted Cruz. There's a PAC working to unseat him called Lose Cruz, and we'll start with this one from that group.
Texas is number one. Texas is number one in forcible rapes.
Disturbing new research related to the state's abortion ban. Texas has seen more than 26,000 rape-related pregnancies since the abortion ban went into effect 16 months ago.
You don't favor a rape or an incest exception.
You'd be forcing the mother to go through unspeakable trauma to carry her rapist baby for 9 months.
I don't believe it's the child's fault.
Forcing raped children to have children. That is a Republican policy.
Yeah, and notoriously, Greg Abbott got asked about rape and said something to the effect of, that won't be a problem in Texas because we're going to stop rape. Well, they haven't, obviously. And now thousands of women and girls are pregnant due to being raped. Pretty horrific. Here's the next ad from the same group that focuses on Cruz fleeing to Cancun while Texas was suffering a devastating freeze. Then he blamed his daughters. Then it was exposed he was lying about that. Here it is.
This morning, the humanitarian crisis in Texas is accelerating. Millions still without power or water. Hospitals around the state pushed to their brink, and the death toll is rising.
Senator Ted Cruz made time for a family vacation in the middle of our state's historic winter storm.
The images were everywhere today, showing the Texas senator with his family boarding that flight to Mexico.
This is inexcusable, and Texans should be outraged.
And it ends on a slide for our podcast listeners that says, let's give Ted Cruz a permanent vacation. Absolutely. As you know, I grew up in Texas and currently live in Texas, so I'm emotionally invested in this race. I'll be covering it lots as we get closer to the election. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. You can become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.